When the pandemic hit in March, many businesses braced for a prolonged downturn. But with the mining industry, it was more of a pause, allowing people to regroup. The pandemic did have two structural changes for many mining operations. First, it limited the number of personnel on mine sites. This created a challenge for many suppliers. And second, it expedited the adoption of remote technology solutions. This combination turned into a wave of increased activity for coding metrology. Let's dig in now and learn more from Tony Facciolo. Hi, Tony. Welcome to The Dig.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what coding metrology actually does.
Yeah, so Coding Metrology is a 3D laser scanning company that really focuses on the processing aspect of things. And really our main products are in the mining industry for mill efficiency gains and crusher efficiency gains by means of 3D scanning and reporting. And then the main focus behind, or the main foundation behind what we do really is the automation of coding within our process that really makes things viable to begin with.
So that what that allows you to do, it's the speed at which your coding, I guess, does in terms of capturing information. You must capture a lot of data points.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned data. We were just kind of calculating recently. We're accumulating around at least 25 gigs of data every day. So the amount of IT behind what we're doing is growing daily, literally. So yeah, it's been one of the additional challenges during COVID has just been getting IT components, like the actual physical, CPUs, things like that. So it's been interesting.
Wow. Yeah. So and that's probably a good segue here. When the pandemic hit, tell us a little bit about how that affected your business.
Yeah, it was a very odd transition. I'm sure a lot of people have had similar scenarios where the world has gone sideways and things are very different. One thing that's really helped us weather the storm and just finding all the news and getting the latest information has definitely been getting it from MSTA. I don't know if it was daily or weekly, but we were getting them so regularly, I didn't even have to go looking for more information, which before all that, I'd say a good 5-10% of my time was literally just spent researching what's the latest with some of my clients, some of the clients that I'm looking on bringing on, things like that. And, not only did I get a shortcut on that, but I also didn't have to worry about trying to figure out exactly which clients are still open this week and which ones are going to close next month and things like that. So that was a huge benefit to us. And I'm sure it would be to most even medium-sized companies, not even just smaller companies. So it's a good thing that you guys did that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, glad to hear that. That was helpful information. I know we felt that it was really important to get that kind of status of operations for people, because it was a big part of what we did at the beginning of the pandemic. This opaqueness, if you will, to information. There's so much information, things were changing so fast. So that must have had quite the impact on your business.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, okay, the pandemic hits, mines start shutting down. What's going through your head?
I think I was researching a lot of this, even when the pandemic, before it was, when it was pre-pandemic, I was researching a lot because I was supposed to go to China on a certain project for business last year. And the place I was supposed to go to was about 100 to 200 kilometers northeast of Wuhan. And that was my first experience seeing what Wuhan was, because I was like, that's a massive city. And just by fluke, a couple months later, this news starts coming out. And I guess that's probably why it came up in my feed is, I had already been researching that area, and then to see there's this weird disease and blah, blah, blah. It's like, they're kind of passing it off as a flu. And then it's quite obvious it's not a flu. And yeah, things started getting a little crazy. So I think in January, I started kind of being a little more, just in case, let me make sure I get more training videos done. Maybe I get a little more. I was already moving towards clients having their own scanners and doing their own scanning and us doing the processing for them. So I guess it kind of worked out well. And when things really started getting, restrictive here in Canada in March, and frankly around the world as well, I started seeing the potential of clients shutting down and things like that. And I was supposed to have 2 trips in late March, early April that were going to happen. And obviously they both got canceled pretty preemptively. So that was a real kick to the company to have things going so well finally after so many years of building a business and doing all these things to be rolling along nice and smooth, to then have it kind of curtailed for a bit. So with that, I kind of thought, all right, I'm going to spend my time doing something productive. So I spent half my time doing code development and building the backbone of our company, and just waiting for work, and that'll come around when it comes around. And then the other half was, with all the stuff I was reading about all the COVID stuff, especially with nurses in hospitals, is like, there's nobody's lungs are more important during that pandemic, especially that at that time, than the nurses and doctors. Because if they're not healthy enough to take care of the rest of us, what are we going to do? Well, there's a lot of smart people, but I'm not becoming a doctor overnight. Even I can't do anything like that. So one of the things I oriented myself toward doing was developing something I was calling the third lung, and it was basically a booster that could be used with painting respirator, like a typical respirator, like what we use in mines, in order to alleviate some of the restrictive pulling effect when you're breathing through the filters. Because the reason filters work so well is they're so restrictive. Well, to me, I call that something, that's something I usually call, when I go to mine sites after wearing a respirator for a few hours, a lung hangover, because the next day you feel it. Like that day you feel okay, and the next day you're like, all right, clearly I was, my lungs were working overtime. So I was developing that. I was working with the Canadian government on the procurement side to help with some of the funding. And at the time where it reached its precipice, where I thought, okay, this is where I'm going to start selling a bunch of them and producing them. At the same time, cases started going down. I was like, that's great. Like, this isn't something I really wanted to do. This is something, it was interesting, and I felt like it was needed. So I just decided to see what I could do with it. I think with the summer, the cases going down over the summer, we had enough time as a country to facilitate the procurement of the real, already established, already regulated products that work. So
yeah, and you're not talking about the classic N95. You're talking about the ones with the cartridges. You see them on,
correct.
And like you said, you spend your life kind of living in confined spaces on sites, and you're used to from personal experience how these things feel. And yeah, you can only imagine someone doing day in, day out. And we remember seeing the pictures of these frontline workers with these, these bruises over their face and stuff that you get from these things. So, so what exactly is this third lung? Maybe
so you gave me the reminder there that in March, one of the jobs that I did have come in right when all the mining stuff was shutting down, was to scan a hospital for, my understanding was that they were using it to fast track an already existing renovation in order to have that capacity in the event that COVID ramped up, in order, in case hospitalizations increase. So by scanning and giving them a full documentation of the 3D environment, there was a whole bunch of people that didn't have to go to site. There was a whole bunch of people that could do all of their work remotely from CAD stations in their offices from the engineering side, all sorts of things. And it helped, better plan how to execute the construction finalization of that expansion or that renovation in that hospital.
Right.
So that was cool. And in doing that, I had to wear a respirator all day for the time I was scanning. And in wearing a respirator, normally when I go to a mine site, I wear it for an hour or two or a couple of hours, because what I do, I go in, I scan, I get out, and I'm done. Right. But at a hospital, you're scanning the whole environment. It took a lot longer. So even I, after 1 or 2 days, had the bruising on the top of my nose, and it was there for like a week. And and I can only imagine having to do that every day, day in, day out for weeks on end. On top of the stress of a pandemic.
Yeah.
As a nurse, it's a whole other level. So I was like, okay, I have this idea of something that I would want for me for going to a mine site. I should pursue it a little bit. So that's
right.
What
and
brought
so,
that on.
and this is the thing you refer to as the third lung. So what does this actually do?
So essentially, like I said, it's a booster for an existing external filtration system. So you can wear a normal respirator with a face mask with the reusable filters. And one of the issues that we were having in March as a country was getting N95 masks. So some nurses and doctors were resorting to basically using essentially garbage. They were using what would be normally thrown out and having to reuse it. And then they were also working on ozone filtrations to help reuse disposable masks. And I thought, okay, well, there's got to be a better way than that. If we can use reusable filters like what we use in the mining industry, one of the restrictions with that is they're even harder to breathe through. So I thought, well, that plus the boosting pack plus the ozone filtration units, that's a pretty good all-around solution. You can use these units hundreds of times, or maybe less, but more than 5 or 10 for sure. So the added benefit to the third lung was that it would, and I'm not even sure if that's what I'm going to end up calling this thing down the road, but that's what I've been calling it, myself. So in the office, I guess, is that it also has extra capacity within the unit to hold extra air. So it actually puts less strain on the filters as well, because you're pulling through constantly rather than the way that your lungs work, where you're inhaling, pause, exhaling, inhaling, pause, exhaling. So during a normal cycle of a filter, you're just pulling, 1/3 of the time, give or take, opposed to a constant system with a booster would be pulling the whole time. And in the event that you have sudden intake of breath, you would have that extra capacity in the unit to pull from, which would be back mounted,
So you would effectively, it'd be easier on their lungs, and the filters would last longer.
Yeah.
Okay. And
yeah.
So yeah, you haven't commercialized it yet. So it's kind of a bit of a.
No. So that leads into my other COVID experiences that, March, I was busy with the hospital and all that, and all the mines started shutting down and my trips got canceled. And then April was literally, I think, the first month ever since I started the company, I think, that we didn't have any business, which is incredibly weird. So, I utilized that time to continue with the third lung and build on our code base, but it's still a little painful when things are finally going well, and you built so much and worked so hard to then have that curtail, and it's kind of like you're then sitting back going, I've got it good, I'm healthy at home, who cares?
Right.
So I just kept working with what I was doing, and then May came around and the influx just, all the mines that were closed down on emergency opened all back up at the same time, and then other mines shut down, so there was kind of an influx of the one and a curtailing of the other. So we got really busy, and I just thought it was an initial influx of the mines that I service opening back up. And then it turned out, no, it's, a lot of companies were now taking on to scanning, where maybe before they were on the edge. Now they're really made the jump to go more digitized in order to abide by some of the corporate programs, I guess, that were being implemented to reduce people, reduce contact, and do what they could for COVID early on. So
that was a common theme we heard, was a lot of companies, a real minimum contingent to keep things going, but then who did you really need to have on site, especially to minimize that exposure risk with COVID. And so it seemed like you have an offering that's perfect. You can provide the technology to them, and if I understand it, the traditional way of what you do in terms of checking out a mill liner would typically take like multiple people, but you can do it with just say 1 or 2 people, I guess.
Yeah, so I found most mine sites, they'll usually have 4 or 5 people if you consider all the the confined space watch person and the people going into the mill, the people around the area, things like that. So even during COVID times or pandemic times, if you're going to reduce people, you're still going to kind of need at least 3. You're going to need 2 people to conduct the inspection and 1 to be the whole watch for the confined space safety. With scanning, not only are you reducing how many people, but you're also significantly reducing the amount of time. So you can go into the mill by yourself with a whole watch. You're both, good distance apart, and you can maintain that distance the entire time. You set up the scanner in the middle of the mill. So not only that, but you're not going to the edges of the mill where it's a little more risky with falling debris and things like that. You scan for a few minutes, you get out, you send us the data, and you're done. You can now go and do all the other reports, all the other inspections you have to do throughout your site during a shutdown. And we're already halfway done our processing, by the time you start back up. So
right.
To talk a little bit about what we do, I mean, the big benefits have always been from the client side. Of usually the pull has usually been for maintenance optimize, or maintenance reduction, and then liner efficiency, and then mill operation efficiency gains. We've really been pushing it the backwards direction, where we strongly believe, and we're starting to get people really seeing the benefit now, that the benefits really are mill optimization first, liner optimization second, and maintenance reduction third. Because the amount of money used on energy consumption alone, let alone media charge, and things like that in a mill are monumental by comparison to other industries doing other things. So, with comminution taking 3% of the world's energy, if you can make that fraction of a percentage reduction, it's you're at least talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, let alone millions. So
that's right. So almost the reduced maintenance time is an outcome of the benefits of what you're doing.
And I think it's just that's one of those things that's most tangible, is the maintenance side, because it's very much like, okay, hours, dollars, done. Mill efficiency, there's a lot more variables at play. So with us, we're really focused on trying to define the unknowns, especially lifter face angle throughout the length of the mill. That's the biggest parameter on one of the biggest parameters on inefficiencies within a mill during operations. So for us, we're really defining, it's like, okay, well, you said that you think that your efficiency is this, and that it's primarily because of the changes you did with the ball charge or the liner or whatever it might be. Well, here's a quantifiable amount of liner loss of face angle, and here's the deviation between the feed, the discharge, and things like that. So I'm getting a little bit too
getting into it. Well, that's okay. You're passionate about what you do. But what we find also with interesting technologies like yourself, the one you offer, and people adapting to them or adopting them, if you will, they start asking what can they do with them, what else they can use the solution for. Are you seeing them asking for a different way of using it?
Yeah, especially I've always dabbled in the construction, the AEC industry, architecture, engineering, construction. Mainly for that reason, is I can keep building on the weird things, doing the weird services, and developing the weird code that's going to propel that to work. So something people in AEC have always done is floor flatness for construction for concrete flooring. And I was like, well, you can do way crazier things than that. That's kind of easy by comparison. So one of the things I get contracted a lot to do is to geolocate bolt holes on a project or on a building usually, in order to get them the as-built of the configuration, rather than just them going to site and measuring it by hand. Actually, behind me, this project here, it's a bus shelter in Toronto, or in Vaughan, actually, just a little bit down the street from us. And they had a scenario where they built the structure, and no matter how accurate it would have been, and they did a fairly great job, the as-built will never match perfectly to the CAD, because the tolerancing on the CAD is looser than what they need for manufacturing or fabricating the glass. So we actually went and made custom targets with these 3D printers, which is why I had them lying around to do the third lung thing. And we custom printed targets, put them on all the holes, and scanned the entire thing, and made a set of code that would extract all of the locations of all of those holes and export it to their CAD model. So that way they now had an as-built of reality over the CAD of the initial design.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff for me.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, hey, Tony, it's been a real pleasure having you on the dig here, sharing with us what you do and how this technology is being used, and a little bit of that story of how you've innovated. As let's see where that leads. It's very interesting story. So again, Thanks a lot for being on the dig.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us on the dig. But before we go, we have Stephanie Alvarez to share some important information with us. Hi, Steph.
Thank you, Ryan. I would like everybody to know you can still join our compendium 2021, as the deadline is coming up very soon. This compendium is very special, and it will be our 25th silver edition. For more information, you can contact Linda Collins at collins@mstacanada.ca. And as always, we are accepting new members. Get connected to a world of opportunities by becoming a member of MSTA Canada. For more information about our membership, please email us at membership@mstacanada.ca. Back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Stephanie. Until next time, I'm Ryan McEachern. Take care and stay safe.